This cares about you, but it's kind of spiky. This cares about you and wants to be nice about it. It only pokes at the wound in order to clean it, you know? Like the sting is healing. Water settles, you know, if you give it half a chance. I pull a card and a feeling jumps to something. I don't know. Where do feelings jump to? Ah, betrayal and forgiveness right next to each other. Ooh, it's good. I will probably leave this there. Ooh, not with death on top. Hello everybody, it's Sylvie. Welcome or welcome back to Tarot Magpie. I hope you're doing all kinds of good today. I am hoping this video is going to make it to the internet, but it is currently raining quite hard on my skylight. So we'll see how this comes together when I come to edit it, whether you can hear me over the sound of a torrential downpour, but that's a British summer for you. Hi, hello, how is everybody? I am talking decks. I'm talking watery decks for Cancer season and just all of the watery signs, but we are of course now in Cancer season, in summer, and appropriately there is a huge quantity of water falling from the sky. So water signs are intuitive, they're emotive, they are kind of impressionistic and sensitive and responsive. I have plants all over my desk because before it started raining, it was blindingly sunny and I'm worried about these two getting scorched. And they're like a cute little backdrop. Anyhow, water signs. I feel like water signs are very talkative and communicative, but not in the way that air signs are communicative. I think water wants to communicate and understand emotion rather than information, which is very much the like air sign domain. So we've got Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Sensitive, emotionally intense, intuitive, creative, dreamy, compassionate, family oriented, all that goodness. Some of these decks that I'm about to show you remind me of particular signs. Some of them are just kind of a watery vibe, but I am going to get straight into it without any additional rambling. First up, this is in no particular order, it's truly just however close they are to me physically. This is the Ritual Tarot. This feels like a very scorpionic? Yeah. A very scorpionic deck to me. It's like intense. Like Scorpio is dark and intense. Scorpio is very sex and death and taboo. It's got that Pluto, it's got that Mars, it's got that like 8th house kind of association. And I just feel like this deck fits that energy to a T. Like this is it's a very mysterious kind of, and even the name Ritual Tarot, it has this, and I say this with love, it almost feels like it's trying, like it's really trying to be edgy. As always, gotta shout out my favorite Ace of Pentacles ever in existence. Yeah, I feel like the Ritual Tarot is kind of, it's trying really hard to fit the Scorpio vibe, and it makes sense. And I say that with love, but it's definitely like an edgy little deck. It's also very deep and very intense. I always think of Scorpio as like Hades, as like deep water. Yeah, like there's a lot of depth to it, and there's a lot of depth to this deck. Also, the fact that this deck doesn't have titles, I think definitely fits that. This deck fits that like mysterious kind of vibe with the lack of titles. I have the marked edition, so we can see the titles on the back. You know, 9 of coins here, but if you take the image just as it is, you kind of have to search for the traditional card association a little bit. So I really like that. I really love this deck. And I think it's definitely a Scorpio kind of vibe. It's a little bit dark and edgy and mysterious. I'm like, come on. So that's the Ritual Tarot. Okay. Outgrow Yourself. I use this more as an oracle than a tarot, but it is based on the Thoth tarot. We've got the Thoth titles. Like here is Failure, which it might be the 6 of something, counting the flowers, but I'm truly not sure. And this deck, this is my Mars in Cancer. This is my Mars moon conjunct in Cancer. Like fucking personified, or not even personified, but deckified. I don't know. This deck is spiky. It's a little bit passive aggressive. It tells you what you need to hear and it cares about you, but it's not gonna like mince words or spend too much time, you know, there and giving you a hug and a pat on the head. Like, it's going to help you, but it's not the deck to go to when you just need like a hug and somebody to tell you that it's all going to be okay. Like, we have those decks. I have those decks. This is not that deck. This is like, it cares about you, and it's going to show it's going to nurture you through like a little bit of brutal honesty. And like I say, I do feel like this is just my this is my Mars conjunct Moon in Cancer. It's really caring. That's the Moon in Cancer bit. Like, Moon is very at home in Cancer, but it's also, Mars in Cancer isn't fun. It's a little bit passive aggressive. It's a little bit like, yikes. It cares about you. It maybe isn't going to seem like that. It's maybe going to be a little bit passive aggressive. But yeah, like, are you wasting your time? Are you wasting your time? It's a bit Mars in Cancer. Anyway, I love this deck so much. It's one of my absolute favorites, and it simply had to be in my watery decks video. So that is the Outgrow Yourself. A couple of really obvious picks next. This is the Oceanum Arcanae. Oh, look at that death sitting right on the top of the stack there. Love it. It's an oceany deck for water signs. Like, what did you expect from me? I think this is lovely. I have the earth one as well. She's doing them for all the elements. The fire one was just recently on Kickstarter. It's very cool. It's reptiles, and there's like dinosaurs for the sword suit, and then there's going to be an air deck. And hopefully when she launches the air deck, I will get the air deck and the fire deck at the same time. But today I'm supposed to be talking about the water deck. So this is the ocean one. I really like these animal decks because they are a little bit moodier, partly due to the art style and all this black line work. They're visually just a little bit darker and kind of almost grittier or grungier, and so that really lends itself to the way they read for me. Some of the cards are really sweet, like this Page of Pentacles here, and then I don't know if I went past her while I was talking. Found her. This deck has one of my absolute favorite High Priestess cards of all time. It's one of those deep sea anglerfish, and so I personally don't subscribe to the idea of the High Priestess as the divine feminine, because the divine feminine is kind of meaningless to me personally. But I do love that a card that is so often pitched as the divine feminine is this creature where, like, the male of the species is essentially meaningless. They're teeny tiny, and they just kind of latch onto the female, and they're just there for like reproductive purposes. I think that's fun, but I love this kind of vicious High Priestess. I think this is a great card. I had to pull the ocean deck for the watery cards, so this one is a bit of a no-brainer, but I really enjoy the energy of this deck. Kayla Bryn Hultquist Todd. I love the way that she does her animal decks because they are kind of one part anthropomorphized, like this. We're holding a wand, we've got the courts wearing like armor and crowns and things. So it's kind of anthropomorphized, it's kind of animals doing people things, but then it's also animals in their natural habitat doing animal things. Like, I think it's blended the both of them really, really cleverly in a way that is very much to my taste in an animal deck. So I love her decks, they're beautiful. I think this is a gorgeous Knight of Cups. The guidebook that comes with this it's a little white book, or a little white booklet, and it's just got enough about why she chose each creature for each card. And I really appreciate that, because I don't need a little white book of tarot meanings. Like, I've got that down. I want to know why the choices were made, and you can tell that she really did think about the choices she made. She didn't just stick a bunch of sea creatures in here for no reason. So that is the Oceanum Arcanae. Alright, next up, this is Tarot of the Dream Enchantress. This is kind of dreamy and fantastical. It feels quite Pisces to me for that reason. And the artwork, I really, really feel like it lends itself to the water kind of signs because it is watercolor. And I know that in my airy decks video, a lot of those were watercolor in a way that felt very airy, whereas this card's a good example. You can tell that this was done with a lot of like wet on wet watercolor technique. So the artwork was very saturated with water, and you know, that fits. This one again, is fairly straightforward association with the kind of dreaminess and the fantasy world that this inhabits. Is very watery, is especially very Pisces. I really enjoy this tower. This is one of my favorite towers, I think. Is that a bold claim? Although one of my least favorite empresses ever is in this deck, but also my favorite Queen of Swords. Apparently I have a lot of strong likes and dislikes about this deck. I love this Six of Swords, think it's really gorgeous. I think this is such an underrated deck. I feel like I never see anybody talking about this deck on YouTube. It's a low Scarabeo, and I really love low Scarabeo cardstock, and like this kind of cardstock. I think it's really easy to shuffle. I like the slightly smaller size. And this death is honestly kind of haunting. Okay, one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Queen of Swords is of all time. Why is this woman indoors? Why is this woman inside a stone castle? I don't like it. That is, I didn't realize I was picky about that until this deck, but why is this woman not out of doors? Yeah, so there's that. I don't like this Empress. I think it just feels off. The vibes are off, you know? Anyway, this deck is, it's very evocative. And I think part of that maybe is the like fantastical setting. And maybe that would hit differently for me if I wasn't such a fantasy lover in terms of like books and things. But it feels fantasy, but not in like a fae energy way, although these could arguably be like elves or fairies or something. It doesn't have that kind of fae energy. It just feels like a fantasy setting. And I really enjoy it. And I think this is a very watery deck. So that is the Tarot of the Dream Enchantress. All right, this is another obvious one, and also this isn't a tarot deck. I've been trying to keep these videos to tarot specifically, but I had to shout out the Feelings deck when I'm talking about the water suits. So this is the Reclaim Oracle. This is indie, but I think it's still available. I think this is the 2nd edition. No, it's the 3rd edition. I have no idea what is currently available, but this is a Feelings deck. It's a very valuable deck in my collection. I don't use it in the same way as I use any other decks. This kind of is used in a very specific way for me, and it's just imagery and a title naming a feeling. So we've got like denial, integrity, release, connection. And I find this very evocative because obviously I have felt feelings of attachment before. I felt feelings of grief, good Lord, have I, revenge, love. Like these are familiar emotions. And so I get a kind of, I don't know if I'd even call it intuitive hit. It's not, I don't know, I suppose it is intuition. It feels more visceral than that, of relating to the feeling on the card. And then I really enjoy the artwork in a lot of these because it just feels very readable. It's very easy for me to translate these images into something that makes sense to me through the lens of my experiences, I suppose. And primarily this is a deck that I use to help me actually feel my feelings. So not only is it a feelings deck and thus makes sense in the water science video, but I use this as a tool to actually kind of work through what I'm feeling when I don't really know what I'm feeling. I just know I'm feeling a way. I like using this deck to kind of work through that. I did a whole video in which I featured this deck, and I think it was Tarot for Tough Times or something like that. I will link it, where I think I spoke in a bit more detail about how I use this deck to kind of work through tricky feelings. But it's incredibly valuable to me. I wouldn't be without it. And I love the diversity of words in this deck. I think it's a 90 card deck, and that's a lot of feelings, and there are a lot that seem kind of similar, but I think there is a lot of nuance. Like there was a grief earlier, and here we've got a loss, and on the face of it they seem like they could be describing the same thing, but I think they are actually quite different feelings when you're actually in the moment feeling the feeling. And I am somebody who really values specific language. I place a lot of importance on finding the right words to, you know, say whatever it is I'm trying to say, but especially when it comes to figuring out how I'm feeling at any given time, I do a lot of that kind of verbally. Even if it's only inside my own head or in a journal, I do it through like language. That's how I work through things and relate to things. So I really enjoy the diversity of words in this deck, and also the subtleties of differences in this deck. And I think also the artwork has a lot to do with that. So betrayal and forgiveness right next to each other. Ooh, it's good. Okay, so that is the Reclaim Oracle. It puts things into a perspective that I think is useful, even if it's not necessarily relevant, to help you kind of work through whatever it is you've got going on. Anyway, all right, Deviant Moon Tarot. I don't think this is one I would previously have thought of as a water suit deck. Visually, it's not giving me wateriness. It's certainly not what I go to as a nurturing or comforting deck. I know a lot of people use this for shadow work, so I can see the kind of Scorpio vibes maybe. But the reason that I decided to grab this kind of last minute was because I recently, in my decks that get straight to the point, speedy readers video, mentioned this as a quick reader because I get just an instant visceral feeling looking at the cards before I even necessarily really register what card I'm looking at and what its meanings are. I pull a card and I get a feeling. And so for that reason, it had to be in this video. And that might be quite a individual experience, but I had to mention it because I get feelings from this deck. Like I said in that video, some decks I pull a card and like a keyword jumps to mind. This deck, I pull a card and a feeling jumps to something. I don't know where do feelings jump to, but anyway, like it's kind of visceral. So yeah, for that reason, it ends up in my water decks video because I think that's how this deck communicates. At least with me, it's very feelings based. Oh, just the details in the images. And it's funny because I just mentioned with the Reclaim Oracle about thinking in language, and I'm a very, like, I think in words. I've had this conversation with my sister so many times where she doesn't get it because she thinks very much in like images, and I think in full sentences if I'm lucky, if my brain's not running away from me, but like I think in words, and I kind of don't do that with this deck, or the words come second maybe. Like I get a feeling from the deck and then I can kind of like, oh yeah, it's because of the way the moon is like, I don't know, sucking the life force out of them, but like, do you know what I mean? I get a feeling and then I can like rationalize it, not rationalize it, but make sense of it and kind of put the pieces together. Anyway, I don't know if that made any sense, but maybe that's just the vibe of this deck. It's not something that works so well in language, and maybe that also comes through with how I discuss it. So I will probably leave this there. Oh, not with death on top. Ace of Cups. Ace of Cups can sit on top. This is the Deviant Moon. All right, this is another dreamy deck. This is the Dream Visions Tarot. Dream Vision, 2nd edition. I don't know if this is still available. It was a Kickstarter a couple years ago, but anyhow, this again, it's because it's more dreams. I'm gonna be honest, it's just more dreams, and that's kind of why I grabbed this one. And so maybe it feels like an obvious choice. Again, it feels a bit Pisces to me, but I nearly chose this as an Aquarius deck in my air decks video, kind of for the, like, this one's good. The people look kind of alien, kind of otherworldly. Like they're people, they're certainly humanoid, but they are very stylized, and it kind of gives like alien vibes, especially with it's got like a galactic kind of vibe to the artwork as well. So point being, I nearly chose this as an Aquarius deck, but I decided it was more watery. And now that I come to talking about it, love this Two of Wands, by the way. Now that I come to talking about it, I can't tell you why it feels more watery than airy, but it just does. There's something quite fluid and flowy in the artwork. And there's something interesting there about air and water because they're quite opposing. They also share a lot of similarities. Like they also have a lot of movement. They're very dynamic. I think air dissipates, water settles, you know, if you give it half a chance. And there's something about this deck that has more of that kind of settling quality. Also, with this Queen of Cups, is that not so fabulous? Yeah, no, that's interesting though. Following that little thought, air dissipates, water settles, and the Cups Court is truly exquisite in this deck. So yeah, I'm not sure I can really justify this one or explain it in so many words rather, but this is definitely a watery deck. It's also obviously, you know, it's called the Dream Vision. I'm thinking Pisces, I'm thinking dreams. My camera cut me off, but I think I was done talking about the dream vision. So yeah, not sure exactly why it feels like a water deck, but it does. All right, crystal visions. Again, there's a lot of overlapping names. We've got the dream enchantress, the dream vision, and then the crystal vision. I might try working with these three together just for fun. See what that does. But anyhow, this is the crystal vision. This is a bit of a Sylvie favorite. I'm pretty sure I talk about this frequently, but this is one of my most nurturing and sensitive decks. You know how I was saying that the Outgrow Yourself, this cares about you, but it's kind of spiky. This cares about you and wants to be nice about it. This is like not afraid to tell you the truth. I've had some readings with this deck that do very much hit home, and you can kind of see even in the imagery, especially in a lot of the sword suits, it's not trying to take all of the bite out of the cards, but it's not trying to hurt your feelings. Like, it wants to tell you the truth. It doesn't, it wants to do that tactfully. It's a Cancer deck. What can I say? It wants to be supportive and be nurturing, and it cares about you. Sometimes truth hurts, and that's just the Three of Swords for you, isn't it? The truth hurts. But yeah, so crystal visions. This also was in that video I did of like decks for tricky times and when I'm feeling sad and bad, the decks that I reach for. This is absolutely one of them, because it can do the soft and gentle, and some of the cards, like the death in this is one of my favorites, which I expect I've gone past already while I was rambling away. Oh no, here we go. Like the death in here is one of my favorites. It's one of the harsher cards, and it's very much death. Like this is, it's got like gravestone, angel of death, but also the butterflies and the rebirth. Like it's death. It's not shying away from the death and grief part of the card, but it's not unduly harsh. It's not so much tough love as like just generally being supportive. This is a very supportive deck. Right, and finally, one of my favorites that I definitely talk about all the time is the Guardian of the Night Tarot. So this feels kind of similar to the Crystal Visions. It's kind, it's caring. It only pokes at the wound in order to clean it, you know? Like the sting is healing. It's that kind of a deck. This and the Crystal Visions both. Like, you know how it is. You cut yourself, you've got to clean it. It stings like fuck, but you know it's important to get all the gunk out so it doesn't fester, and that's what this deck does. But this deck in a reading always feels less personal, less kind of individual than the Crystal Visions. And I think that's probably because this is an animal deck, whereas the Crystal Visions has people in it. But this deck feels more like somebody who cares about you because it's what they do. They care about you because they care about people, not because they care about you in particular. Does that make sense? It's got that kind of energy to it. Like, it being less personal doesn't make it any less sincere, doesn't make it any less genuine. It's caring because that's just what it does. And it kind of cares indiscriminately. I get that kind of slightly removed energy from it when I'm reading with it. But I love this. I talk about this all the time. It's one of my absolute favorites. I was really surprised by how taken I was with this quite soft and gentle and quite kind deck, but I would not be without it. It's absolutely one of my favorites. So I love the snake shedding its skin for judgment. I love this so much because so many people do this with the death card, and I'm like, no, death is painful, death hurts, death is the painful moment, death is what you need to grieve, and then the rebirth comes later. Death is a sign that it's coming, but you've got to get through that pain point first, and then you get to shed your skin and come back to life. But anyhow, and there's our Seven of Cups. Also very beautiful, very dreamy. Love it a lot. Like there's our death card. You see, that's a lot more painful. So we will end it there, but we will not put the death card on top. That is the Guardian of the Night Tarot. And that is my final deck for this video. So this concludes my decks for the signs videos. This is the fourth and final one. I've now done fire signs, earth signs, air signs, and water signs. Maybe I'll come back to this in a year or two and break it down further by each individual sign, but I do not yet feel that confident in my knowledge of astrology, and I just wanted to kind of do a little bit more broad You can use these, well, you can use whatever deck, whenever the hell you like. I'm not your mum, but these feel very watery, and I like using these to kind of connect to the energy of the zodiac season we're in. Although, of course, there are no rules. I use all my decks all the time. But anyhow, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed this little mini series. I will link the other 3 elemental decks videos down in the description. Let me know your favorites. Let me know what your favorite watery decks are, if you've got any that I didn't show in this video. And that's it from me. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending some time with me. I really hope you've enjoyed. Give me a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.